Beautiful. So today we're going to talk about something that seems to be everybody's focus this time of the year. We're going to discuss resolutions because everybody loves at the beginning of the year to kind of think about whether or not we're going to put some resolutions into place as we start kind of the new chapter with the new year. So we're going to talk today about what can the addict partner and the betrayed partner resolve to do differently in their recovery. So, as you're listening to the webinar, I want you to be more aware of your role in your recovery and the healing that you're doing, as opposed to looking at it through the lenses of what you want your partner to be doing in their recovery and in their healing. It's going to require that you be very open and honest with yourself and really be accountable, because I think I've chosen some really good areas to think about, because as usual, I'm bringing to this webinar what I see showing up in my office. So just recently, a few of the things that I see that this webinar would be helpful for are the clients that are repeatedly having emotional dysregulation, and they report they're doing their recovery work. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the resolutions that will help with that. I do have addict partners that get stuck in denial and they can't kind of push through the shame and get to accountability. Sometimes I see that there's a lot of struggling in recovery, and that individual is not coming in to see their therapist on a regular basis. The other thing that's been showing up is, like I said a little bit earlier, that we have partners who are more focused on the other person and their recovery than they are on their own. And then lastly, there's that sometimes lack of compassion and empathy, not only for my other partner, but even for myself. So that applies to both the betrayed partner and the addict partner, because even betrayed partners need to have compassion and empathy for the addict in their recovery. So let's talk. We're going to do 10 for each. We're going to talk about 10 resolutions that the betrayed spouse might consider as you start out the new year. I really like this first one because I think it's very, very positive. As a betrayed partner, resolve to focus on yourself more this year. And I'm not talking necessarily recovery. I want you to take your focus solely off of, if your focus is solely on the addict partner, and bring your awareness back to you. If you're focusing a lot on your family, then bring more focus back to you. So that means I want you to exercise or meditate, do more journaling, get creative in your journaling. I had a client once who she used artwork in her journaling, and it became such a healing activity. And she didn't realize how much she loved doing art. She used mixed mediums. She used chalk and paint and fabric and, paper. And she created some really wonderful depictions of what it was like going through recovery. Hang out with friends more. And we're going to talk about the kinds of friends you're going to want to hang out with, but be more social, stop isolating, go out and buy some new clothes, buy something new, treat yourself, take up a new hobby or re-engage in a hobby that maybe you've let go or you used to do in the past. One of the things that helped me when I was going through my betrayal trauma, and that was I really stepped into doing more volunteer work. That gave me the ability to kind of step outside of what I was dealing with and help other people. And that was really nice because it helped take my mind off of all that I was going through. Just do something that you've been wanting to do for years. You don't have to do a lot, just pick something. Okay. Next, resolve to make your healing recovery your number one priority. So put together a recovery plan, just like we want the addict partner to do. You need to put down in writing your recovery plan, share it with your therapist, share it with your addict partner. I love the 3-circle exercise. I do that with the women's groups. I know the addicts do it with their recovery plan. And so what you would do is in that inner circle, the red circle, you're going to list your bottom line behaviors. So I want you to think about the safety seeking behaviors that you might get into. These are the things that I will not do, because it's creating more disconnection, additional disconnection to your relationship. So it would be the unhealthy types of safety seeking. It would be things like raging, and in that raging, it be throwing objects, using shame-based language. It might be not doing any self-care. So put those things that you don't want to do because it's going to prevent you from being able to do recovery. The next circle outside the red one is yellow, and that's what we call the middle circle behaviors. I like to think of these as the behaviors that may or they may not be appropriate, but they lead you into the red circle. So it's going to be things like not getting enough sleep, not doing my dailies on a consistent basis, maybe engaging in common enemy intimacy. So I'm talking to somebody about my addict partner in a negative way. So it gets me stirred up. And so the next time I see my partner, I start picking a fight. It could be things like taking care of everybody else but yourself, like I've mentioned earlier. So think about those things that as I'm starting to slip closer to those behaviors I don't want to do, what am I failing to do as far as my recovery work, or what I'm engaging in doing that is not so healthy? And then the outer circle, the green circle, is all those healthy behaviors. I really want the betrayed partners to be aware of what are the specific things I need to do, what works for me. So you've got to practice, you've got to try things. For some of my clients, putting on headphones and listening to meditation and breathing works. For other clients, it's going out and walking in nature and that repetitive movement of walking back and forth. So figure out what helps you stay in your body, where you feel like you're in the present moment, you're feeling grounded, you're feeling good. And you might have just a handful of things, but make sure you have them in those outer circle behaviors. The next resolution is to work on controlling your negative thoughts. This is a big one for the betrayed partners. You've got to identify, we call it monkey mind in my office, that constant chatter in your head that's just taking you all over the place. And because our brain has that negative bias, it's going to be negative thoughts. And as we're in our negative thoughts about our addict partner, our situation, our future, the past, whatever it is, it's going to set us up to be more easily triggered. And our thoughts are so powerful because it can trigger us into anger. It can trigger us as a betrayed partner into the fear cycle. It can take us into our own shame about ourselves. Our thoughts are so powerful. I've talked about thought stopping in the past. So you've got to figure out, how can I get out of those thoughts? I tell my clients, just simply recognize when you're in them, say out loud, stop it, I'm not going to go there. It's not completely true, because we do know the brain takes bits and pieces of information, fills in the gaps, and creates a story. So then you might want to replace those negative thoughts with some type of positive affirmation, a positive statement. So it might be something like, I need to remind myself that I didn't cause my partner's addiction, right? I might be struggling with it right now. I may not be doing everything exactly right, but I'm doing the best I know how to do. That would be a great one for if you've got a lot of shame around your recovery and around your partner's addiction. Another one is, I can't control my addict's behaviors, but I can control mine. And in this moment, I choose to, and then decide what you choose to do. I choose to step out of my negative thoughts. Listen to music, do a healthy distraction, journal, do the dump. I tell my clients to get that journal and just write everything that's going around in your head. Get the monkey mind out of your head and onto paper. Okay, next resolution. Become more assertive and ask your addict partner for certain actions that hold him or her accountable. This is a hard one because it requires that you understand healthy boundaries. So you've got to learn about healthy boundaries. You might need your therapist to help you with this, because not only do we have to figure out what the boundary is, we have to figure out what is the consequence, and then we have to talk about how do we implement it and how do we hold to it. It's a real struggle to figure out what a healthy boundary is. But as a betrayed partner, you do need to have boundaries in place. And at times, you may need to be a little more assertive in putting them in place and following through on them. If you have a difficult time doing that, you need to get in and figure out why. And typically, I'm not that good in a situation like that with my own self-awareness. I need somebody to help me. So get in and see your therapist to help you with that. Resolve not to allow the addict partner to continue in doing unhealthy behaviors that affect you in a negative way. You've got to put a boundary around it. A simple approach that I've used with groups and with clients, and that is using the DEAR acronym. which is a great way, a formula where you can assert what your need is. So the D stands for describe. So you're going to describe what it is that you need. Here's what I need you to do. Here's the boundary I need to put into place. E is you're going to express then to the other person what it is. Here's the boundary. Here's the why even you can add. Then you've got to assert it. Make sure you're very clear. You're very detailed in how that's going to look. And then you want to reinforce it. And that can be a simple statement of, I really appreciate the fact that you're going to hold to this boundary and create safety for me. So that is such a simple formula if you're struggling with, okay, how do I put a boundary into place? It's really important that you do have these types of boundaries in place. And they might be like having a weekly check-in. I find that betrayed partners stay much more regulated when they can have that at least a weekly check-in with their addict partner about the recovery work that they're both doing. It might even be around sharing recovery plans. And I believe that what goes around comes around. So if you want your addict partner to share their recovery plan with you, you should share yours with them as well. Okay, next one. Resolve to attend some type of recovery group. If you don't attend a recovery group, then resolve to educate yourself about your experience and get the education you need that will support you in your recovery work. So you might even choose to read at least 6 books this next year on things like your betrayal trauma, on shame. And we know Brene Brown has some wonderful books on that. Read the Practicing Prodependence book and do the exercises in the back. Join a 12-step group, an S&on group. Make sure that it's a group that fits your needs. You may have to attend several. Make sure it's a group that's very supportive. So when you leave there, you feel supported. Get a sponsor or an accountability partner, but do something so you have some kind of something structure in place to help you as you're moving through your recovery work. Don't do it alone. Next resolution. Resolve not to be stuck in the victim mentality. So if you find yourself feeling like you're a victim, and it's true, you can acknowledge the fact that you have been, as a betrayed partner, extremely impacted by your addict partner sexual acting out, by all the betrayal. It's true. We have to recognize that, yes, there has been a disruption to this attachment, but we also at some point have to choose to not stay the victim and to move forward. So we have to consciously decide that I've got to step forward and do my healing recovery, because as long as we stay a victim, we're powerless. That just goes hand in hand. So one of the things you can do is to start focusing on meeting your own needs if your addict partner can't meet your needs for you. Start doing whatever you can, even if it's 1 or 2 recovery activities or behaviors every day. Start there, but keep adding to that. Acknowledge to yourself that you do have control in your life. Identify the areas that you currently have control in, and then focus on that. So you get to choose what you focus on. That's really an important part. And so there's going to be a point in time where, yes, we're a victim, but we have to work on becoming empowered so we can do our own healing work. Next resolution. Resolve to respond rather than react. One of my favorite principles in teaching my clients is this: you've got to know the difference. So when I react, it is automatic. It's almost like a knee-jerk reaction. Something comes along, I'm triggered, and bam, I'm into that same reaction. And most often it's not a positive reaction. It typically takes me into anxiety, anger, shutting down, withdrawing, those types of feelings and behaviors. And so what happens is we get stuck in a repetitive cycle. If I'm an addict, I get stuck in my addiction. If I'm a betrayed partner who's having trauma responses, I get stuck in that cycle. So what we have to do is we have to recognize when we're triggered and teach ourselves and practice taking a pause. That means I've got to go do some self-care or some breathing. I've got to do some of my recovery skills and tools, get myself grounded, get my brain back online, meaning I'm connected to that executive functioning part of my brain, that prefrontal cortex. I also like to add to that some really awesome questions that help ground me and help me to respond. So, one of the things I ask myself is, what do I really want or need in this moment? So, what's going on for me? What do I need? Or what's the need that's not being met? Then I ask myself, okay, how can I create a positive outcome? Because right now, man, I just want to say something really mean and hurtful. So I've got to stop and go, okay, if I do that, I can fast forward and I know where that's going to go. But if I want a positive outcome, I might need to take a breath and I might need to think about it and do some journaling first. Okay, how can I change my thinking? Like I said earlier, your thoughts may have taken you into that trigger, they might have supported it and kind of led you there. So, do I need to let go of some of those negative thoughts? Do I need to reframe it? And the other thing is, how can I do it differently than I've done it in the past so that I can create that positive outcome? I love those questions because when I get triggered and I want to go automatically react, if I stop and think those through, it gives me a lot more clarity. Now, as we respond, there's growth because we have more self awareness. And so at some point, as a betrayed partner, you want to get to that point where you're responding rather than reacting. Speaking of reacting, one of the things you need to do is you've got to resolve to develop a plan for any triggers. If you don't have one in place, this is crucial. So you've got to identify, who can you call? What can you do to take your mind off of whatever's triggered you? What emotional regulation tools do you have in your tool bag? Have you put together a first aid kit? Have you put together a list of your go-to activities that help you regulate and get out of that trauma response? So come up with your trauma trigger remedies. The next resolution is choose your support system wisely. You've got to be very careful if you're in recovery and you want to do it in a healthy way, that you surround yourself with group members that are there to support you, to help you use healthy tools and skills, to have empathy for you. What's really difficult is to have friends that judge you and might give you input that's not maybe asked for regarding the state of your relationship and what you should do, whether you should stay or leave. There might even be family members and friends who they think they're well-meaning, but they may do things that takes you into your own shame of feeling like you're not good enough. So choose wisely the people that are there to support you, the ones that you're really vulnerable with, the ones that you're going to, kind of let them hold your trust. So not just everybody. So that's another one to be very aware of. Don't isolate. A lot of betrayed partners, that is a struggle. They isolate. You've got to find safe people to share with. You can't get through recovery in this area alone. It requires that you have supportive, healthy people there for you. And then the last resolution is be yourself. Show up with honesty and authenticity. If you expect the addict partner to show up this way, then you must also. Like I said, what goes around comes around. So if you're struggling with being honest and authentic with your addict partner, you need to figure out why. Is it the fear that if I do tell them how I'm really feeling in this moment, that it's going to trigger them and they're going to slip? Is it that I'm afraid that it's going to end the relationship? Is it I fear judgment? You may need to go in and you may need to work with a therapist to figure that out, or work with your group. That's a great thing to take into group and to work on. Okay, so what are some of the resolutions for the addict partner? The first one is, if you haven't already done so, end the addictive, sexually compulsive behaviors. Resolve to do that. If you're struggling, you've got to be honest with your therapist. You've got to make sure that if you're having a struggle with those inner circle behaviors and you're spending a lot of time in those yellow mid-circle behaviors, that you let your therapist know that. So stop rationalizing and justifying, especially when it comes to reporting slips. That's a big one that I see. You've got to be honest about it. See your therapist weekly if you're struggling, so that you're not just trying to maintain sobriety, you're combining it with recovery. That is so essential. Put together a detailed recovery plan. Take into consideration the safety of the betrayed partner in that. You share it with your partner, share it with your therapist, share it with your group when it's appropriate, so that you've got some accountability there. Get into a support group, get into a recovery group if you're struggling. Make this one of your main priorities in your recovery, starting right now at the beginning of the year. And then if you have slips, you've got to report them and gain that awareness of what led you into the slip and what was your thinking and what are you going to do differently and what is the plan moving forward so you don't have a slip. So do some type of relapse prevention plan or a relapse prevention sheet. You might share that with your therapist, share it with your group, share it with your partner, whatever is appropriate there. The next one is to resolve to stop the lies, stop the trickle down truth, the gaslighting, the stonewalling, the blame shifting, and the deceptive behavior. If you don't know what that is, then you need to find somebody who can educate you on that. So read a book on it. There's a lot of great webinars. There's groups that you can join online. Sex and Healing Relationship has incredible groups, and so find a group so you can educate yourself on what those are. The lying and the deceptive behavior can happen in every aspect of your life, even with the betrayed partner. If that's the case, then you really need to work with your therapist and you need to make sure you're not lying with your therapist, that you're not minimizing things, that you're not gaslighting your therapist. It's really important that you put healthy internal boundaries in place. Remember, an internal boundary is the boundary that I put in place for myself, that I follow that boundary. I hold to that boundary so that other people are safe around me. It's really important that you take accountability, that you not, Darvo and flip everything around and make it about the betrayed partner when they come to you with something, or you stonewall them by not answering or talking or communicating about it, or you deny the betrayed partner's reality and gaslight. Next resolution, be more proactive in discussing your recovery work with your betrayed partner. For some reason, we've got to reframe this. I see oftentimes the addict partner going, she just wants to control my recovery. She wants to know exactly what I'm doing. Well, what if we reframed it to, I'm willing to create as much safety as possible for my betrayed partner. I created this. I caused this betrayal trauma. So I'm going to share with my partner my 3-circle plan. I'm going to share with my partner what I'm doing so that they feel safe, that they know that I'm taking recovery seriously, that they can feel relieved that I've got the support I need. I just had a client come in recently that said, I was so dysregulated until my addict partner found this therapist that is really helping him understand his addiction. And it's almost like I just went, I just had this sigh of relief. And all of a sudden I feel more grounded because I know that this addict partner is working with somebody that I trust and that I know is helping them understand their addiction. So meet, if you need to at times. I've had my betrayed partners, or I've had my addict partners bring their spouse in to talk about recovery plans. I had that happen recently with one of my clients, and they met and it was hard, but at the end there was safety that was created. So I really like that idea with the right boundaries around it. The next one is resolve to be open to answering any questions that your betrayed partner might have. Okay. You've got to resolve to do it in a calm and a non-defensive manner. Again, if you're not willing to do this, you've got to figure out the why. So again, that's why getting in to see your therapist on a regular basis is so important, or getting into a recovery group is so vital. If you've got formal therapeutic disclosure in the process and you're preparing for it, it is okay to hold off asking questions. It would be a good thing to set a boundary and put a boundary in place as the two of you are working on disclosure, that any questions that the betrayed partner has, that they write them down. They can include them in the questions that they turn over to the addict partner's therapist, and that the addict and the therapist work on together. And so if it's possible, that's one of the healthier ways to handle it. The other thing is, as an addict partner, offer to do a disclosure. Don't be resistant. If your betrayed partner needs to do a formal therapeutic disclosure, don't be resistant, because that is their opportunity to ask all those burning questions that they need, all those questions they just need to have resolved. So be open to that. Next resolution, if you're not Attending a formal addiction recovery group, then you're going to do exactly what we said the betrayed partner needs to do. Get into a support group. Read at least 6 books on addiction. I love Out of the Doghouse, so you can understand your partner. Helping Her Heal by Carol Sheets is great. Self-compassion books are wonderful. So your therapist can guide you on that. Other group members or other people that you know that are doing recovery might also have some real good recommendations on that. Make sure you are in a 12-step group. And a note on the 12-step group, make sure that it is a 12-step group that is positive and helps you move forward in recovery. It's not a 12-step group where you go and you talk about your betrayed partners and how hard life is with them. We want to focus on your recovery work. Get a sponsor, get a qualified CSAT therapist, do something, create a structure around your recovery. Next resolution is work on being more compassionate and empathetic towards your spouse or your partner. Remember, your betrayed partner is not your enemy. They are someone who is in extreme emotional pain. They're in trauma. So stop blaming your addictions, your slips, your lack of recovery on your spouse, on your partner. Be more aware and more empathetic towards your spouse and what they must be going through when they experience a trigger or you see other signs of their trauma. Be able to get to that point in your own recovery where you recognize when your shame comes up, you can figure out how to contain it or work through it, and you can be there and show up. Focus on your spouse's feelings and emotions. If you can focus on that rather than all of the stories, and then ask them what they need from you in that moment, they will feel like you have so much empathy for them. The next resolution is choose your support system of people wisely. I already talked about that. It's so important. Get rid of any friends who drag you down, help you rationalize your behaviors, minimize what you've done, criticize your choice to stay in the relationship or leave. So make sure, again, that you're surrounding yourself with those people that support you in your recovery. The next resolution is to lead a life of transparency, openness, honesty, and integrity. We talked about that with the betrayed partner. Again, if you want your betrayed partner to trust you, you've got to prove it with your actions. I say this in group all the time to women. Consistent recovery over time creates trust for them, and everybody nods their head. Yes, consistent recovery over time, I see changes. I see movement. I start to trust. So it's so important that you are transparent. Share what you're doing. If you make a mistake, just own up to it, and just figure out what you're going to learn from that. Figure out how to do it differently moving forward. That's part of your growth. The next one that I just added today, because it came to mind when I was having a session with somebody, and that was this: resolve to ask your betrayed partner each week what you can do for them. What's one thing I can do for you this week to create more safety and connection as we're working on recovery? If you did that once a week, I'm telling you, that would create more connection in your relationship. Now, it's got to be reasonable. It's got to be doable. And a lot of times your partner might say to you, well, I just need you to create more safety. Okay, you need more safety. I hear you saying that. What would that look like? What would you see me doing? What would you be experiencing? Give me a picture of that. Exactly. How would that look? Because then you can know exactly. It might be that they're just going to say, well, I just want you to do 2 check-ins with me this week. Okay, when would you like to do that? What would that look like? So get specific on that if it's general. And then the last resolution is you're going to resolve to commit 100% to your marriage or to your relationship, to your partner's healing, and you're going to do whatever it takes. So express remorse when you need to. Make amends when you need to. Stop letting your ego run the show. Stop letting your shame get in the way of you creating that connection with your partner. Be willing to accept the consequences for what you've done. There are going to be some consequences, and there's going to be some repair that you need to do. Refrain from telling your betrayed partner to just get over it or to move on. And don't expect there to be a timeline. There is no timeline for trauma. I tell my clients that all the time. I know that it's very frustrating at times for an addict partner because they're working so hard on their recovery. They see their betrayed partner's struggling and they want them to be better in 3 months. But the reality of it is it's not going to be 3 months. And what a lot of the studies show right now is that for betrayed partner, it's anywhere from 18 months to 3 years. For the addict partner, we're talking 3 to 5 years. So it is a process. Recovery is something that you're never going to stop doing. You're going to gain some wonderful skill set, especially if you resolve to do some of the things that I've talked about today. So if you're struggling in any of these areas, make an appointment with your therapist, take it to him or her, become part of that support group, return to your support group for assistance and support. Verbalize your resolutions to your partner. Let them know, here's what I'm working on. I'm adding to my recovery. And then start integrating them on a daily basis in your recovery work. And one of the things I like to do is to journal the progress, journal the goals, check in occasionally so that you can see how far you've come. That's a really positive way to reinforce the hard work that you're doing. So anyway, those are my thoughts and my ideas on how we can start out a brand new year as we're working on our healing and our recovery.
Thank you, Debbie. That was amazing. For those of you who don't know, I'm Scott. I work with Seeking Integrity. Usually Tammy's here. I'm filling in for Tammy. Type your questions into the Q&A. I do have some thoughts for you, Debbie, and maybe some questions. So, at one point when you were talking about addict resolutions, you said so you can make your partner feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I am of the opinion that I cannot make my partner feel safe. I can facilitate my partner feeling safe, but I cannot make my partner feel safe any more than my partner can make me stay sober. So I want to make that clear for both addicts and partners. If I'm a partner, I'll feel safe when I feel safe. And when I'm an addict, I'll stay sober because I want to stay sober. And maybe I want to stay sober so that you'll feel safe, be in a relationship, but I can't make you feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
If I show good recovery over time, and you said this exactly, my partner will almost assuredly start to feel safe progressively, but it's a slow process. There's no timeline. Yeah. So anyway, did you have any thoughts on that or?
Well, I agree with you 100%. I think you're right. It is about, can I, through my healthy recovery behaviors, create an environment of safety, right? Can I somehow facilitate, even like you said, I loved that word, my partner in their recovery work so they can get to that point where they feel safe. You're right. Because it's a choice. It goes back to what I talked about earlier. Feeling safe is a choice. My partner can be doing nothing for recovery and no recovery work, and I can still feel safe depending on the work I'm doing with myself. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
I love how you said that.
Yeah, and that goes both directions too. I mean, betrayed partners can facilitate an atmosphere where the addict feels safe doing, I don't want to be sexist, but his recovery. Um, you know, so we can help each other. And that's a lot of what these resolutions were really about is taking care of myself, but also facilitating an atmosphere so my partner can heal whatever, whether, so I love that you use 3 circle plans with partners. I use 3 circle plans for everything. I'm 3 circle plans were created for sex addicts, bottom line behaviors, slippery behaviors, healthy behaviors. And they're great for sex addicts. But I'm also an alcoholic and a drug addict. And when I work with alcoholics and drug addicts, they have a circle plan. And I'm in the middle of creating a circle plan for my relationship with my mother because there's a lot of trauma there and it's still ongoing. And, here are the things I will not put up with. Here are the slippery things from my end and her end. And here are the green circle stuff that I feel safe with her. So I use circle plans even when I'm trying to formulate boundaries because boundaries, as you know, and by the way, Debbie has some great webinars on boundaries. If you want to know about boundaries, look them up. But boundaries are hard. How do I set healthy boundaries? How do I keep and hold healthy boundaries? It's really hard. And I find circle plans help me kind of get my head straight. Um, the other thing I wanted to add, I used to do some work for this guy named Joe DeCina. And Joe is crazy in the best possible way. He was on Wall Street. He was making a boatload of money and he hated every minute of it. So he wanted to do something else. So he wanted to help people. So he created his company and he's done a lot of things. He created Spartan Races. He had a TV show for a while. But he talks about obstacle immunity. And that's kind of his whole thing is obstacle immunity. And when we have these resolutions, they can look really daunting. So I did want to say obstacle immunity. Joe will take guys who come back from Afghanistan with their legs blown off and they think their life is over. And he'll say, nope, I just signed you up for the Chicago Marathon. It's in 6 months. You're going to run in it. And they look at him like he's insane. And he says, today we're going to strap your new legs on and we're going to walk to the mailbox. Tomorrow we're going to walk to the end of the block. The next day we're going to walk around the block. In 2 weeks we're going to be jogging. And in 6 months you're going to run this marathon. And they do it. And they realize, oh, I can do anything, no matter how daunting, as long as I take it like one step at a time. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And as we start overcoming little obstacles here and little obstacles there, we develop what we call obstacle immunity. We start expecting to succeed. And you mentioned, let go of the negative thoughts. This is one way to let go of negative thoughts. And I've done it in my life, and I work with guys on doing this all the time, is just little successes will add up and we start looking for obstacles to overcome. And if you have that mindset when you go into New Year's resolutions, it's kind of almost exciting to look at this list and be like, yes, I want to do this. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
I love that. Well, what I loved about your story too was, your friend in helping this person run a marathon, there were 2 people. That person had the support. And that's what I love. And I do believe in recovery, we cannot do recovery alone. And I love the idea of obstacle immunity. Lots of times I do need other people to help me push through those obstacles. And then they get easier and easier. I don't have to do it alone. And so thank you. I love that story.
Yeah, cool.
Love it.
Let's jump into our Q&A. My sex addict partner blows through my boundaries on a regular basis. I've heard that if it can be blown through, it's not a good boundary. I'm struggling with how to reword or revise many of them to strengthen things like not lying, not hiding porn or devices, following through with agreements, etc. I'm wondering if you have any tips on how to do this. I've also tried to find information on how it affects you when your boundaries are regularly disregarded, but I can't really find any specifics, just that it's not good for your mental health. I feel stuck in deep and intense anger, and I suspect this is why. Thank you. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to start at the end of that question and say something, and then we'll move back. Okay. The first one is that you feel stuck in deep and intense anger, and you suspect that it's because of the boundary issue. You're absolutely right. I tell my clients that there's anger or resentment, it's a boundary issue. There's either no boundary put into place around it, it's a poor boundary, or we're not holding to the boundaries. So which is it? And I'm hearing in your question, you're asking, gosh, is it a poor boundary that I have? Am I not wording it right, putting it together correctly? Am I not following through on it? The interesting thing about boundaries is that, boundaries, we think it's about controlling something. And we have to reframe it is that a boundary is there to create safety. So if I look at a boundary as a betrayed partner, is this boundary's got to be in place, because if my partner is lying to me or viewing porn on certain devices, they are no longer safe. And so the only person I can control is not the addict partner. I can control me. So as I'm putting a boundary into place and my addict partner is lying on a repeated basis, it might be that if they lie to you about something, then there's got to be some type of a consequence. And you're the one that's going to have to be the one who moves forward and initiates and does the consequence. So it's most typically going to be, you're not safe to be around, so I've got to distance myself from you. So that either means I've got to leave the house and go someplace safe. I would like you to move into another room so that we have some distance, or to a different part of the house. Or if the cases are very, very severe and it warrants it, it might even be, I've got to consider a therapeutic separation at that point. So recognize, what is it that I need for safety? If they're hiding porn, they're hiding devices, obviously that's something you're not be able to control. They're going to do it. If an addict wants to do it, they're going to do it, unfortunately. But if you find out that they are doing that, you've put a boundary into place that would sound like, if you choose to watch porn and hide it and have devices and hide it, then this is what I will do to create safety, or this is the consequences, then I'm going to do this. Oftentimes I will actually word a boundary that way, and I'll say, I'm going to ask you not to use porn or hide porn and hide your devices. However, if you choose to do that, then I don't feel safe. So I'm going to leave and go stay at my mom's house for 2 or 3 days and just do some self-care. And then I'll come back. We have to make sure also, because boundaries, I could go down the whole rabbit hole of boundaries. The consequences have got to match the boundary itself. So sometimes I do find with betrayed partners, they're afraid to hold to a consequence that's hard. And so they don't put, maybe they might make too small of a consequence, or they'll go way big and too way big of a consequence. So again, I would encourage you to turn to somebody who can help you with boundaries. I love Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Nedra Tawwab. I really like that book. I think it's a very clear, easy book that helps you understand boundaries. Now, it's not boundaries around addiction recovery and betrayal trauma recovery, but it's about boundaries with everybody. And in the book, it's some of the struggles that we have with boundaries are addressed, and how to figure out what an appropriate consequence is, and how to verbalize the boundary. For you, a lot of it is verbalizing it. I love the 4-step boundary. I call it the talking boundary. So we go through the 4 steps, and I've mentioned that numerous times here. And that is, when I see or hear you do this, here's my thinking about it. Here's how it makes me feel. Here's my boundary. And write it down. If you struggle, I would be probably so dysregulated, if I'm trying to, off the top of my head, come up with a boundary in the moment. So write it down and then present it. As far as blowing through a boundary, you've got to understand that addicts like to blow through boundaries. The issue that addicts have is they don't have good boundaries. And that's one of the things that they're learning, not only their own boundaries, but to respect other people's boundaries. So it may not be a good boundary. It may not be a good consequence. It may not be that you're following through on that boundary. I don't know, but just kind of look at, I would start with maybe the top 2 or 3 things that are most important to you, and then start addressing that. Okay, how can I put a boundary in place that creates safety for me? And then figure out what the consequence is, which is typically, I can no longer stay in this relationship. It's not safe. I can no longer stay in this conversation. I can no longer sleep in the same area as you. Whatever that is, I've got to separate a little bit and create safety for me. So those are some of my thoughts. That's boundaries in a nutshell, because we could go so much deeper.
I love listening to you talk about boundaries. And I'm going to put a bug in your ear. I'm going to say, Debbie, you need to sit down and write a nice, thin, readable book about betrayed partners and healthy boundaries, how betrayed partners can set healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
And we will publish it for you. I will tell you right now, you have a publisher.
Oh, I love that. Well, I'm doing boundaries, the workshop for the intensive that they're having for
Yeah,
the women.
I know.
So it's going to be fabulous. I'm just so excited.
Yeah. And since you mentioned, we're having an Empowered Women workshop January 19th to 21st. It's for betrayed partners. You do have to be in therapy. You do have to be doing some work on yourself already. Debbie is going to be one of the facilitators there. You just heard her. She's going to talk about boundaries. Yay. We're doing another, we're going to do this a couple times a year. So you can find information on seekingintegrity.com. Just go to the Betrayed Partners tab, and one of the drop downs is the Empowered Women Retreat. So there's our plug for the Empowered
Yeah,
Women.
I love it.
Cool. Okay, next question. I'm less than 6 months from discovery, and my husband thinks that telling me how aroused he is by me or making passes at me is a compliment. In reality, after years of sexual abandonment, he's acting out, his asking to watch me or telling me he is aroused is not okay. All I can envision is him huddling over his phone on the toilet while he seems to be taking one addiction and replacing it. How can I explain this to him? Because obviously I'm hurt that I was not his drug of choice, but now I do not want to be his drug of choice.
Well, that's good awareness you have. I want to say that you recognize the fact that he is still in his addiction and some of those addictive behaviors, maybe is a better way to put it. And yes, he has kind of turned to, and Scott, you can speak to this more because you work more with addicts than I do. And that is that, sometimes they rationalize that, well, it involves you, so it's no longer
Right.
really considered, part of my addiction. This is healthy, sexuality. And we do know that addict partners struggle with, and pornography, those that struggle with pornography, they don't know healthy human sexuality. They don't understand it. They don't understand that type of connection. That's part of I call it the higher level work that they have to do as they're getting into their recovery. And it's kind of later on, in the recovery work. But for you, it's going to be, you've got to put some boundaries into place, because when he does that, he is no longer safe for you. I imagine that you get triggered and that, it creates, some type of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response when he's doing this, especially if your window of tolerance, how much stress you can handle is very, very narrow. So maybe start by making a list of his behaviors that don't feel safe. What I would probably do, because I like to write, it helps me kind of process. I would probably do several columns, and I would probably in one column put a list of the behaviors that don't feel safe to you. And then what I would put is, I think the emotion that it brings up for you. And then I do another column of here's what I think about it. So I'm kind of doing the talking boundary is what I'm doing. And then in the other column is, here's what I need, or here's the boundary around that. And so for you, it would be something along the lines of, I'm looking at your question again to see, it might be that moving forward, you're no longer allowed to tell me that you're aroused by me, or to let me know that you're aroused. So when I hear you tell me you're aroused, and I hear you tell me all the reasons why, I think to myself, this isn't appropriate and it doesn't feel safe. It makes me feel really triggered. I feel a lot of anxiety. So moving forward, I don't want you telling me when you're aroused. And if you choose to do that, then I'm going to excuse myself, and I'm going to go somewhere safe, and I'm going to go take care of myself and do some self-care.
Yeah. As Debbie said, I primarily work with addicts, and I'll use very different language when I'm talking to the addicts than I'm going to use here. But I look at them and I say, why would your wife want to have sex with you right now? Would you want to have sex with somebody you don't trust? And they're like, yeah, because half the time they're still in an addictive mindset. When I first get to them, sex is ideally an expression of emotional intimacy that already exists.
Mm-hmm.
Sex itself is not intimacy. It can be an expression of intimacy if the intimacy is already there. And intimacy comes from trust. And I can be vulnerable with you and tell you the truth, and you're okay with that. And you can be vulnerable with me and tell me the truth, and I'm okay with that. And I'm not keeping secrets from you. You're not keeping secrets from me. I'm not lying to you. I'm not gaslighting you. You've been lying and keeping secrets from and gaslighting your partner. I mean, I'm talking to the addicts here, for God knows how long.
Mhm.
And they are, that doesn't just go away just because you say I'm in recovery, or I've been sober for 6 months. Okay, I still don't trust you, you know.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're describing here in this question. I mean, some of the, telling me he's aroused, it's not okay. I mean, yeah, it's not okay. I mean, a lot of betrayed partners have boundaries like no touching if you don't ask, and we will not be having sex until I tell you. If we ever have sex again, I will initiate it. And, boundaries, by the way, can change over time as the underlying need changes. The need that Debbie's talking about here is I need to feel safe. And you're complimenting me and making passes at me and it feels icky. Um, gross. Don't want you doing that. 2 years from now, 3 years from now, it may feel the opposite of gross.
Mhm.
Boundary would be very different. And these do change. And Debbie, can you talk about that? Because,
Mhm.
as couples, as trust is rebuilt, this all changes
Yeah. Well,
sometimes.
and I want to go back to the fact that it's really important. The very first part of your question, you said, I'm less than 6 months from discovery. You are still in crisis.
Mhm.
Really, when I see a client, that crisis can last up to a year, 18 months. But really, you're still in that, hey, I just discovered this, and my system has had this major jolt and shock to it. And now you're coming after me like this and telling me that it's appropriate and it's okay when I don't even feel safe in any aspect of my life right now because I'm in the middle of a crisis. And so I would encourage you, and I'm going to read between the lines a little bit. I'm hoping that you've got a CSAT therapist, somebody that really understands betrayal trauma, and that they're there to help you with a situation like this and help you get regulated and give you the skills and tools that you need, and to assist you in how to put the boundary together. If you don't know how to do boundaries, it's really hard to figure that out. Find somebody who can let you know, yeah, it's okay to say that. It's okay to put this boundary in place. Yes, that's a healthy boundary. Yes, that's an appropriate consequence. But you just sitting and listening to him say that and not getting angry, that's not necessarily a boundary, and
Right.
it's not appropriate, you know? And so it's perfectly fine for you to say to him, you're not safe when you talk to me that way. It's not
Yeah.
appropriate. I don't like it. It makes me feel icky. Like I'm using your word,
Yeah.
Scott. And so if you do that, I'm going to disconnect. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm going to take a time out from you for the next 24 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
When I set a boundary, it's not about keeping someone out. It's about letting them in safely. And
mhm,
if you're not safe, I'm not
yeah,
letting you in. Just
yeah,
period.
yeah,
When you're safe again, I'll let you in again. But until
exactly.
then, no.
Mhm,
Um, and I want to speak to the addicts here just for a second.
mhm,
Um, you knew about your addiction and your behavior for years, decades, some of you. Your partner found out about it 6 months ago or 3 weeks ago or whatever. You're probably feeling a little relief, like, okay, I can finally do something about this thing that's been controlling me. And your partner is not feeling that. Your partner just got run over by a truck. Okay. Debbie used the word crisis earlier. Your partner is in emotional crisis. The worst possible thing that can happen to a human being is a loved one betrays them. I mean, yee. And she's still dealing with that.
mhm,
And you're sort of popping forward in your recovery and starting to feel good about yourself because maybe you've got a little clean time and, your sponsor's patting you on the back and great. And I'm happy for you, but don't expect your wife to be in the same spot that you're in right now. She is going to be several steps behind you in the trust process. You know, you're going to have to be trustworthy for 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30 steps before she starts even starting to follow along and feel that you're trustworthy. I mean, it takes at least a year. And Debbie's talking about as much as 3 years, to fully heal, but
mhm,
to really start trusting again, it takes at least a year.
mhm,
Um, I mean, and why wouldn't it? The example that Dr. Rob gives sometimes is, you've got somebody, you hired them to work in your company. They're a friend, you've known them forever. You catch them stealing from petty cash one day. They apologize. They swear they'll never do it again. They pay the money back, you
Mhm.
know, and 18 months later, you walk in and they've got their hand on the petty cash drawer. It's not open. They're not doing anything. But your first thought is still going to be, is this person stealing from me again? And that's what betrayal is like. It takes a long time before the first thought changes to something other than, is he up to it again? Um, you know,
Yeah. And that hypervigilance that the betrayed partner has, especially in those early months, right? And now what I'm thinking with this question is, not only am I hypervigilant, right? I'm so aware of everything going on around me because I'm in this crisis, but now you're coming at me as well. So
right,
now I've got to be hypervigilant, in this area too, because this is a violation of, if he's grabbing and touching you in a sexual manner,
right.
that's abusive behavior. And now I'm on guard all the time for that. So how do you find that space for you to heal? Because you too need that ability to feel like, okay, I can stay grounded, because we've got to be in our bodies, and, we got to be connected to the right part of our brain in order to start
Yeah,
the healing. And that's hard during the first 6 months.
yeah. And one of the most profound things a sex addict ever said to me was, I was cheating on my wife with my wife,
Mm,
meaning he was not emotionally present or intimately present while he was literally using his wife for sex as an object. And as I read this question, I was like, man, he's objectifying his wife and she doesn't like it. And I don't blame her. you know,
yep.
See a whole person there and, you know,
Yeah.
anyway. Um, Next question. Any way to get this list? I assume this is the list of
Of my
resolutions.
resolutions, yeah, I can put that together and we can make
Okay.
that available. You
Yeah.
can reach out to me directly or to Scott, or I don't know if we can even just put the list and add it. Isn't this going to go up on YouTube? Can we add it in
Um,
on the
we
notes
could do
somehow?
that. If
You tell
you'll
me, what would
email
be
me the
best?
list, I'll put it up on YouTube with the video, and I'll also turn
Beautiful.
it into like a little blog or something on our website,
Awesome.
so people can access it on the website, and even people who don't see the webinar, which would be really cool.
Awesome.
So just
Yeah.
email that to me, and I'll definitely make sure that gets put up.
Okay.
Um,
Beautiful.
awesome.
Beautiful.
Um, Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Debbie, for your time and your expertise and your thoughtfulness and your kindness and all of the other words that uh, are glowing for you. We always appreciate you being here. I love when I get to fill in with you because I learn so much every time.
Love
So
it
thank
too.
you. Anything you want to say to take us out?
I just want to wish everybody a happy new year. What I love about the new year is it feels like a fresh start. And I am very much a resilience based therapist, and I believe anything's possible. So that's why I loved your obstacle immunity idea, because I do know that even though it's a new year, we are going to have those obstacles,
Mhm.
but one step at a time. So just little steps. And in the end, you go a really long ways. So thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Debbie.
Bye.